I'm here with Hadasa Rivera Marín, who is about to graduate from Appalachian State. And she wrote an honors thesis in Spanish. It was, I found of great interest, and so I wanted to talk a little bit about her, hoping that maybe her words can inspire some other students to consider the possibility of majoring in Spanish. So I'm just going to ask you first in English a little bit about your family background and how it was that you came to Appalachian State.
Sure, yes. So both of my parents are immigrants. They are from Mexico, and they came to the U.S. at a very, very young age. And since I was a little girl, I remember seeing just how hard they had to work, how the amount of effort that they put into it, and oftentimes, the physical impact, or the impact it would have, the impact their work would have on them physically. And so that's a little bit of the reason why I was inspired to write this thesis, to investigate this matter or this subject a little more deeply, just because it's very personal, and coming from a largely Hispanic community, I've seen the impact that a job can have, not only on their physical health but in other aspects of life as well.
What kind of work do your parents do?
So my mom has worked she's had various jobs over the years. She's worked for a cleaning company, and she worked in a factory for a while, and then my dad has done upholstery for the last 20 years. And as you may know, upholstery is a very physically demanding job, and so he's not getting any younger over the years. It's a job that is very fast paced, and so it's definitely had an impact on his health.
And did you grow up in a community that was primarily made up of people with backgrounds similar to your parents? Did you live primarily in an immigrant community?
I did, yes. A lot of our family friends and a lot of the people that we associated with and that I associated with, academically and personally on a daily basis were immigrants or children of immigrants, first-gen students. And so it wasn't uncommon to have parties or on family outings in which these subjects kind of came up, and it was normal. And so yes, from a very young age, I grew up in a primarily immigrant Spanish speaking community.
How many of your friends, your childhood friends, have gone on to college?
I'd say a couple. I was part of this program in high school that was dedicated to helping first-gen students get accepted into a four-year university. And so about 95% of the students within this program were Hispanic, whose parents were immigrants. And so the majority of them went on to a four-year university, but some of them for family reasons, personal reasons, maybe they haven't finished. But I think it was such a great help to have a program like this that focused on our needs and our experiences, and recognized that outside of academically, there were other ways in which we needed support, in which our families needed support. And so I'm very thankful, because I know this is a program that is working or in effect nationwide. And so I know many other students across the country have been impacted and helped in the same way that I was.
What is the name of the program?
Avid.
Avid?
Mm-hmm.
What does Avid stand for?
I actually don't remember.
Well, I can look it up, I guess. Yeah. But it's a program that one finds beyond the
Yes.
local, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah. And I guess the other question I wanted to ask you is when you first came to my class as a student, I was amazed at how well you wrote and how good your reading skills were. And so I would have wanted to ask you how it was that you came with a fairly substantial level of proficiency, not only in speaking, but in reading and writing Spanish.
Yeah, so from a very young age, my parents made sure to teach us their native language, Spanish, and so I learned Spanish before I learned English. It wasn't until I got to school that I really started practicing English, and it's kind of always been like that. At home we speak Spanish, and anywhere else, I speak English. And so also from a very young age, we would go to church and they would have us read out loud and they would have us write. And so my parents really made sure to emphasize that we knew how to read, write, and just basic, comprehension in Spanish. And I am very, very grateful for all of that because, in a country where there are so many immigrants and a large part of those immigrants are Spanish speaking, being bilingual is a very, very useful skill to have in anything, and just not simply in communicating, not just in communicating with other people, but also, in the job market and in the career that I hope to have. So, yeah, I'm very grateful that they invested and took the time to teach us.
Did you read in Spanish when you were in high school for pleasure or?
I did, yes. It wasn't until high school that I started taking these upper level Spanish classes that I really started to learn about, Latin American authors, like Ángeles Mastretta. And so, learning about important Hispanic figures in the U.S., for example, with the Chicano movement. And so I really wish I would have learned that at a younger age. Maybe I would have read a little bit more. But yes, my passion for this area really developed in high school with all the content and all the coursework that I learned.
And what do you expect to do when you graduate?
Well,
you told me that you've had a job interview, I believe, yesterday. What was that like?
I did, yes. It was for a nonprofit. I still, haven't heard back a definitive answer, but I'm hoping that everything goes well. And so basically, the job, it helps. It helps provide support for students in schools as well as their families, and so it would be back in my home community, which is largely made up of immigrants. So it very much aligns with my passion and my hope for the future.
So I've thought for some time that I can see you as a lawyer practicing immigration law and something like this potentially in your future.
I'm not sure. I think it's definitely something I've considered at some point or another, but it would just have to be a decision I have to make. But
And another question is, were you able, when you were growing up, to travel to Mexico with some frequency, go to visit relatives? A lot of times families are divided by the problems of immigration, and sometimes I talk to students that haven't seen grandparents since they were infants. Have you been able to visit your family, your relatives in Mexico?
Yeah, so I went for the first time about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe, and so that was the first time that I met, my grandparents. Luckily, all four of them, are still with us on my mom's side and my dad's side, so I met them for the first time. I met a lot of uncles and aunts that, I never only had conversations with over the phone. And so it was just so interesting and so nice to be able to get to know this family that, we had been separated by for so long. And then not too long ago, my grandparents on my dad's side, they received their travel visas. So I remember the first time my grandma came and we picked her up at the airport. And it was the first time my dad had seen her in over 20 years. And so with a lot of my uncles, it was the same way, it had been like 15 years. And so not seeing your mom for that long, like it's not something that I could ever imagine. But it's a reality for many immigrants in this country.
Another question is that there hasn't been any comprehensive immigration legislation since 1986, I don't think. I remember that when the immigration law of 1986 was passed, it had repercussions at the time I was playing Mexican music and working primarily with immigrants. And it provided the means for example, employees that had been working in the United States for 5 or more years and not had any legal problems, had proof of things like paying light bills, could go and apply for permanent residence. And so at the time, we encouraged all the people that were working in the musical group and in the restaurant to apply, and we supported their applications. And so literally half the crew was able to get, to legalize their status. What do you think we need to do? What sort of legislation do we need? What kind of provisions to fix the problems that we have with immigration?
Yeah, well, I think first we need to provide relief for all of the immigrants that have been in this country for more than 10, 15, 20 years. And so they pay taxes like other U.S. citizens, but they don't have the same benefits to our political system. They don't have the ability to open up retirement accounts because they're not citizens of this country, and that's why they're having to work until, they die, until they're 70, 80, 90 years old, because they don't have any way to support themselves. So I think first that problem needs to be addressed, and then I think we need to expedite the way in which our system works, because oftentimes, people resort to enter the country, with an undocumented status, because the legal process, it can take up to 10 years, and even more. And it's never a guarantee. It's expensive to obtain visas. It's very lengthy process. It's a very emotionally draining process. And so a lot of the times, people living in Latin American countries, they don't have that luxury. They don't have the luxury of time, whether that be, to political instability, economic instability, poverty, famine, war. And so all of these issues that provide, or that you need to react in a fast manner. You need a solution quickly. And so our legal system doesn't allow that. And so I really do think that that's something that needs to be addressed first. And unfortunately, which is one of the things that I talk about in my thesis that I completed this semester, that our immigration laws help in a way to, they help allow labor exploitation. And so I think it's a very sad reality. Yeah, I think those two issues need to be addressed first.
And what sort of protections do you think workers need? So I know in North Carolina, for example, and with the decline of the tobacco industry, one of the things that's come in to take its place is hog farming and chicken farming, and then the industrial processing of meats. What sorts of protections do you think that immigrant workers need in order to live in humane circumstances?
Yeah, so, well, as I mentioned, I think one of the things first off is, we need to resolve their legal status, because a lot of the times if you're undocumented, you're not at the same liberty to maybe to call out what perhaps isn't being done right, if you're being treated unfairly. And so a lot of the times if you are undocumented, you are also not guaranteed, a healthcare plan within these jobs. And so a lot of the times immigrants, they have no other option but continue working in these industries because you need the money, because you have a family to support, because you can't afford to quit. And so through this project, I had the opportunity to interview 2 immigrants, and one of them, I remember, he's undocumented, and so he told me that you don't have a lot of times, you don't have the luxury to try different jobs or go from one industry to the next, because you have responsibilities, and those responsibilities need to be carried out. And so I really do think, again, that legal status needs to be resolved first, and then I think they need to be allowed to organize and allow, organizations to come in and make sure that a company is in line with safety regulations, and making sure that workers aren't going over their stipulated hours, and make sure they're being taken care of. And so really just treat them fairly as we would do, U.S. citizens.
I think it's important for people to hear your message. Students like you who are potentially thinking of coming to the university, but also people in the university itself. I think we have to make greater efforts to accommodate students and to provide the support that's needed for students to thrive. Because a place like this is sometimes a very kind of a foreign environment, I think, for students that are coming out of a Latino community, Spanish-speaking community.
It's a bit of a culture shock.